What was your mindset? Like, what did you think about and how did you handle that?
A Marine in the Marine Corps is designed and formulated to believe that they're the best of the best.
Did you regret getting out at any point, and did you ever try to go back in?
Both. Your mind would race and wander, and it's like, I'm not happy.
118 soldiers, my family all over. I can't copy. I can't tell my family all over. We got crews coming.
Welcome back to Surviving the Street, where policing meets personal growth, tough conversations, and partially filtered stories of real events. With me again today on the podcast, I have with me former U.S. Marine and fellow law enforcement officer. If you didn't listen to the previous podcast regarding work-home life balance, this conversation and the previous one sort of play into one another. So if we're missing something here, you can go find it over there, fill in the gaps. But he's a former Marine, as am I. So we both have experience transitioning from the military out into the civilian world and all the little nuances and things that go on with that. And as maybe you are aware or you've had these experiences or you haven't had them yet, there is a lot of um, not doubt necessarily, but complications that go into that. And again, you may not realize that this will be you, or you will maybe resonate and say, like, yeah, I also had those experiences as well. So, do you want to go over start, when you're in the military, just making that decision to get out and what was going through your mind at the time?
Yep. So in the last podcast, I explained my challenges with my previous marriage. So um, I had made the decision to get out of the Marine Corps in 2012, and I specifically made that decision based on the idea that I wanted to save my marriage. Um, so I started thinking about, well, what was I gonna do, right? So I was a motor T operator in the Marine Corps, and I figured, well, the easiest transition would be to drive a truck. Um, now, I will say I always wanted to be law enforcement when I was getting out. Uh, I thought that that would be the next thing that I was going to do, and I can't even tell you why I didn't even pursue it. I should have. I, uh, uh, I should have done. I just never did. Anyway, so I took the easy route, not necessarily the hard one. Um, and we, I got out in 2012, and I moved to Conroe, Texas, with my former wife. And I was working for a metal building company called Mueller Incorporated, and I would transport metal buildings from the warehouse there to the customer's property, where I would offload all the pieces to the building, and um, and then I would leave and go back and do it again. Anyway, um, I did that for about 2 years until my wife and I at the time decided that we were no longer going to engage in this marriage, which was again on the previous podcast. Um, After that, I didn't have a support system. I didn't have any family or really super close friends that were my age. So I decided to move up to Colorado with a buddy of mine I was in the Marine Corps with. Um, he was in the same unit I was in, and so I moved up there. Uh, we rented a house together, and his dad was working for Public Services, and he had asked I come up there and work with him driving a trash truck. They needed guys to for the summer, and they were pretty short-handed. So I told him, yeah. So I went up there and I drove a trash truck, did a residential trash route for it was about 4 or 5 months, and let me tell you, is that work? Um, I that I mean that was like PT every day, all day long. You would uh, you start in a neighborhood, and you just go down. You jump out of the truck, grab a can, throw the trash in the back, throw the can back, run up to the truck, hit the gas pedal, go as fast as you can to the next house, slam on the brakes, get out, dump the trash. It was a good time.
You actually had to get out of the truck too? Were you driving and had to get out?
So they had multiple trucks. So that's what they call a rear load truck, and that's operating a rear load truck without a partner. So if you don't have a partner, and you have a rear load truck, all that trash goes in the back. Well, it doesn't get there by itself.
What do you mean you don't have a partner? Like you're by yourself?
Yeah, by yourself in the trash truck, and you just yeah.
That's absurd.
So it, the the trash trucks when you're on like the highways and when you're not doing your actual route, you drive it from the left side. When you get over into the neighborhoods where you're going to be, doing your little route, you, there's a little stand up position with a wheel and gas pedal and brake and whatnot that's on the right side. So you would just, like I said, you go from one house, put the trash in the back, run back up to the truck, hit the gas, go up to the next one, slam on the brakes, and you do that because you have, oh man, you probably have 4 or 5 neighborhoods. Trying to get 4 or 5 neighborhoods in a single day it's an all day plus some. So trying to get that done as fast as possible was pretty imperative.
So let me ask you this before we get too far ahead. So when you left the Marine Corps, you went to Colorado?
Texas.
Okay, Texas. And you went to you got a job driving a truck, right?
Yeah.
But you had to do something. Did you had to get certifications and
So right before I left the Marine Corps, all the military branches have some sort of like preparedness program, class, have you, that they try and tell you how to be productive in getting jobs or careers outside of the military. To be honest with you, that class was kind of bullshit. They it, d- they they just talk at you. They don't explain things in depth on how you're going to do this and how you're going to do that. So um, I did want to be law enforcement, but I didn't know the steps necessarily to go and start that.
did you already like certified to drive a truck at that point?
When I got out, yes. So um, going through those EAA classes, the ones they want you to get prepared for, uh, you basically write down what your attributions are, what do you want to do, and I took the easy way out and being motor T, so I decided I was just going to be a truck driver. So they set up a civilian ran class, which was, I believe it was 2 weeks. So for those 2 weeks, I would report to that civilian truck driving school until I got my Class A CDL, and uh, and it was shortly after that was when, probably like 2 months later, is when I left the Marine Corps. Um,
Was there some type of transition thing too where well, I guess you can always apply, right? I know that you're in the Marines, but I'm getting out, so let me apply. Was it like that, or did they actually have, hey, routes, this company, you know?
no, they didn't have routes per se. Um, they did obviously have some sort of contract with that civilian ran truck driving school. They said, hey, if you're gonna be a truck driver, this is the school to go to. Whatever, it's in San Clemente, California, or no, I'm sorry, it was in Carlsbad, California, I believe. Uh, but no, they didn't. They don't have any routes for like some of the trucking companies throughout the country or nothing like that. But got out when I and went to Conroe, and then got divorced, and then went to Colorado, and doing the truck route deal, and then um, I realized real quick that I didn't want to be a trash man. um, it was I was there to help out my buddy's daddy. He asked me for that favor. Um, so
What you're trying to say is you recognize that you were working way too hard.
yes, and not making enough money. Yeah, it was decent money. I believe it was like 17 something an hour. It was decent money. But I would one of the gross things about it is you would when you get home from work, you'd take a shower, and everything would be coming off. You'd be black trash juice. Oh, it's gross. Um, I dump cans and have maggots fall over me, and when I was pretty disgusting. But
So let me ask you, this is a good spot to ask you this. Okay. So you're in the Marine Corps, and well, if you're in the Marines or whatever, right, you know what it takes to just even make it, right? Well, I would say, like, at least at the time when I was there. I mean, I know maybe some things have changed and they're just kind of taking everybody and letting everybody make it, maybe. I don't know.
maybe
I don't know. But the perception to me at the time when I was in the like boot camp, our goal is to make you quit.
Mhm.
Okay. And they made a lot of people quit, you know, uh, a lot of people said the magic words or phrases that got them one-way ticket, out of there basically,
Back
right?
home.
That was the perception for me at the time. And therefore, when you go through all that training, I wouldn't even really call it training, really boot camp. I mean, it's more like, again, we're just trying to make you quit,
Yeah,
you
just a
know?
haze fest.
So when you go, yeah, exactly. So when you go through all of that to get the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, um, you know, and then you spend your years in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps definitely, again, this is my perception, they definitely carry themselves and the way that they look. Okay,
Mhm.
they carry themselves the way that they look, and they do make you believe. There's of course areas where people have their own experiences and this didn't follow through, but they make you at least believe that if you want to be here, you have to live up to a certain standard, and you have to live by a certain code, basically, essentially, right?
Sure.
And then so you go through all that to earn it. You're there and you see the Marine Corps, right? And we hold ourselves to a higher standard. And I can't speak for other, branches or whatever, but you go from that to leaving, and you're you're throwing trash, right?
Mhm.
And so was there at any point when you were doing that, and this kind of plays into my story in a little bit, where you kind of saw those two, you kind of thought about that, right? In your mind, like,
Every day.
man, I was doing this and now I'm doing this,
Mhm.
right? What was your mindset? Like, what did you think about and how did you handle that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a massive separation, right? Um, a Marine in the Marine Corps is designed and formulated to believe that they're the best of the best, right? That's the way. That's the way the Marine Corps presents itself, um, and that's what they uh, distill in you is that you're, between you and 300 of your buddies, you're the most deadly force on this planet, right? Um, and you go from that to slinging trash, um, or doing anything of the sort, whether it's, could be construction or whatever it is.
Yeah, so I would say, like, and if you were a Marine and now you're not, you know exactly what we're talking about. So I would even venture to say it almost doesn't even matter what profession you choose after that. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah, go on.
It's the closest thing to being in the military or Marine Corps specifically is law enforcement. I would imagine. It's so that was a daily struggle as far as when driving a truck, and regardless how much money I was making at the time, whether it's good money, whatever the case may be, I always still had that drive. Um, the the it may not have necessarily been um, to the country or to it was for myself. I wanted to do something bigger. I wanted to do something that meant something. Um, and slinging trash definitely wasn't it. Um, I made a little bit of a better change after I was slinging trash. I started hauling cars on 18 wheelers. Um, and that's it's quite a bit harder than slinging trash. You have to worry about not scratching the cars. Um, you know, hauling brand new Mercedes down the road is not something that is taken lightly. It can be pretty difficult to unload and off, load and unload the cars on the truck without scratching them and everything else. And all that weight, that high weight on the top of the trailer plays a difference. It's not an easy task. And they pay car haulers pretty well. I was making really good money um, before I decided to go law enforcement, and I knew that when I would transition from car hauling to law enforcement, I was going to take a severe pay cut, um, and it didn't matter to me.
And something that I want to point out again before we get too far ahead. So you left the Marines, or we all leave at some point, and initially right? You do have that thought or mindset that I used to be doing this thing, which was of such a high regard and standard, and now I'm doing this thing, which is perceivably not, right? And I think that that is something that you think about, kind of plays in the back of your mind, but ultimately something that you're talking about right now, um, and something that I'll talk about, it doesn't really have anything to do with the fact that you were doing this and now you're doing this. It's the fact that you are not feeling like you are achieving your purpose in what you're doing, right? Was there any part of you, or did you even try? Because I know a lot do. Did you regret getting out at any point, and did you ever try to go back in?
Both. Um, I regretted getting out pretty much as soon as I made the decision that I needed to get a divorce. I specifically got out of the Marine Corps because I was trying to save that marriage, and it didn't work. Um, so that's when the regret first started. Um, I made the attempt to try and go back in the Marine Corps even before the divorce was final. I knew it was probably going to end, um, and I I ended up calling a prior service recruiter, and I only had one conversation with the man. Probably lasted about 5 minutes, and pretty much what he said is that the Marine Corps is not interested in taking prior service members; they're only taking new guys, which doesn't make any sense to me because I'm already trained. I already know the ins and outs of the Marine Corps. My job as a motor T operator, my secondary job as a machine gunner. I already know all this stuff. I've already got the experience. Um, I got out as a corporal, so an E4, and I already had Marines below me, so I knew how to knew how to lead them and get to what's expected by the company I was working for and whatnot. But you know, it it doesn't make any sense. But it irritated me so bad that the guy didn't even he wouldn't take a minute to explain anything as far in depth. He just gave me the short answer, and I was like, you know what, to hell with it. Um, so that was that was beginning part of 2014 is when I made that phone call.
So you were, you know, truck driver, trash guy,
Mm-hmm.
truck driver again,
Yep.
car hauler, is
Yep.
it the proper terminology?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, did you still feel like something was missing, or, were you so far kind of removed at that point from the Marine Corps that that was just something that happened in your life, which it all kind of ends up being that way at some point in time for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you got that job, was that when you disconnected, your mindset from, I was doing that, now I was doing this because this is a little bit better? Does that make sense?
It yeah, it was. I mean, it's a little bit harder of a job. I wouldn't say physically. It's not. It wasn't physically harder, but um, there's a lot more risk involved. Um, but the biggest thing was the pay, right? Um, with the amount that I would work, I was bringing in over 100,000 a year hauling cars. I was bringing in about 73 or so a year, hauling trash. So yeah, I had a little bit motivation there with money, but when I would sit there on the highway, um, driving from you know Grand Junction to Denver, or wherever I was going, up in Wyoming or Utah, I would sit there and your mind would race and wander, and it's like, I'm not happy, right? I need to do something that is fulfilling. Um, if you don't have a fulfilling life, it, it, what are you doing? You only have one life to live, right? You need to do something that is fulfilling for not only you but your family. Um, and having a strong support system with the family also is definitely imperative. But
And like we talked about in the previous podcast, but at what point in time were you driving the car hauler, doing the car hauler thing when you met your current wife?
I was, yeah.
So I guess my question is, because for me it was a little bit different. How long when you were in the Marines to when you got out did you meet your current wife? Like, what was the time period? Was it months, years?
It was years. So I got out 12. I didn't meet her till 16, so 4 years.
Wow, it's a good.
4 years.
I mean, at that point, 4 years. I mean, you're out.
Yeah,
Right. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
there's nothing that's going on in the Marine Corps that's bothering you.
No, I didn't pay any attention to the Marine Corps. Once I made that phone call to that prior service recruiter, and he gave me the short answer, didn't take any time to actually explain why they wouldn't take any prior service Marines at that point in time. I just instantly got pissed. I got, I just said, you know what? I'm not going to dwell on the Marine Corps and try and get back in. I'm just going to move forward.
So you only tried to get back in because you tried to get out for the wrong reasons. Does that make sense?
Correct.
You got out to try and save your marriage, right? But then realized, well, it wasn't salvageable. How much time had passed between that and the Marine Corps?
About a year and a half.
So at that point, do you have to go back through a boot camp? And
No, I don't quite remember exactly. It's not I think it's like a 3-week like physical deal or whatever. It's not boot camp.
But they didn't want you. They're like, nah.
Yeah, they basically the guy said, it's easier that we just want new Marines.
Interesting.
It's again, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, they don't. Not like organizations make sometimes decisions that for whatever reason don't make sense, or we don't have all the information, so we can't make sense of it.
Right.
Does that make sense? The jobs that you had when you got out, and again, I'm kind of asking you these questions based on my own experiences. It doesn't sound like you really were around it, like in your daily job, that you were around other employees initially. Truck driving?
No, I mean, no, not really. It's pretty much just by myself. So not having, yeah, I mean, now that you bring that up, it's crazy. I never thought about it. For the most part, at work, you're by yourself, driving a truck, whatever. I mean, obviously, I was living with a buddy of mine that I was in the Marine Corps with. So after work, come together there at the house, hang out, and BS. But at work, no support system there as far as
I think it's definitely 1,000,000% fair, and I think that well, my story will make a little bit more sense, but there's definitely people in the military that are really looking out for your best interest, even though it might seem like they just want to keep you because they want you or need you or whatever. I don't know, but one thing I remember being stressed when talking to a group of Marines that were getting out was make sure you have a plan. And there's probably Marines that get out without a plan at all, which is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or they have a plan that they think is a good plan, and then they get out and that plan is not as good as they thought it was.
Right.
And in your case, a little bit different. I mean, you had an avenue. They set you up kind of a little bit. I mean, they gave you something.
Sure. Yeah. It was. I would say that it was probably. It is a career path, right?
So my dad was kind of right.
What?
When I said in the previous podcast about my dad was like, "Oh, you're gonna join and be in the infantry? That's stupid. Like, why don't you get a job that you can get when you get out?" I'm like, well, we didn't know at the time. It didn't really make sense, but in a way. But also, you didn't have your class was A, class A drivers.
Yeah, it's
You
Class A
didn't-
CDO.
You didn't have that in the military?
No. So, military, like motor vehicle licenses, has nothing to do with civilian world.
Again, so it doesn't even transition.
No,
But they at least gave you the opportunity to go get it. Seems like
they did. Yeah.
So that's cool. So I would say, like, look, that's a very easy on paper. Hey, everybody needs truck drivers.
Right.
We're going to get you the license you need to drive the truck. You just got to find the job. That seems very realistic that you would be able to choose that path and get that job at some point. Right. So by the time you met your wife, far removed from the Marine Corps, and so like even for her, not like emotionally or whatever, but she didn't have to really go through any of that stuff with you.
No. She
Fortunately or unfortunately, yeah.
Right. She's mentioned that she wishes that she would have been there with me. I mean, she doesn't really know, I guess, the heartaches that are involved with being gone for, you know, 6 to 7 months at a time. So, she's made that comment multiple times, which further proves how supportive this woman really is to me, and to the family. But no, she never had to experience that portion. I am putting her through the paces with my law enforcement career, though, and there's no doubt about that. And she is very verbal about her feelings and how maybe my decisions may not be so good for the family here lately. Which is why, like I said in the previous podcast, trying to make some different decisions going forward.
Right. So your experience, they're not really similar to mine, just because where you were at in your life at the time. So for me, don't want to get into like all these nuanced details and everything, but I knew I wanted to be a police officer even before I joined the Marine Corps. My goal was join the Marine Corps, do my time, and then I had said basically on this like senior high school thing, like you had to write out what you wanted to do with your life, and that's what I said: Marine Corps, then be a cop, and I wrote on there like be an FTO. It's
Right.
another story. And it's kind of funny, cool, whatever, that in my own way, with the podcast and the YouTube and all this stuff, I am doing that, right? Not actually a field trainer because I don't want to be.
Right.
There's a bunch of stuff involved in that doesn't interest me. But I knew from 18 years old that I wanted to teach people, so I think that's pretty cool.
Yep.
But I know that a lot of Marines, military people, struggle with some of the things that we already talked about in terms of transitioning from the military into the civilian world. And yes, you definitely want to have a plan. And I had a plan, but the plan it ended up working out in the end, so to speak. But it didn't go the way that I thought it was going to go. And I think that that's a really, I don't say slippery slope. I mean, could be anybody's situation and it could just go the other way, so I was married at the time. Well, still married, same woman, 13 years. But, I made the decision to get out of the Marine Corps for a number of reasons that I couldn't even possibly list, right? But I'll just give you a couple of the main ones that were driving factors. The last year or 9 months or whatever our deployment was, I was in Afghanistan. So that's you're going to figure out, whether you want to stay or go probably in that time period. That, again, fortunately or unfortunately, that's it's a good place to do it, because it's like, well, if you're thinking about re-enlisting or that time comes up and you're in the Bahamas, I don't know, to make up your own scenario, but you're stateside, swimming on the beach, you're like, this ain't bad,
Right.
But when you're kind of in the suck, that's maybe an easier decision to make. And some dudes just love that stuff, but one of my main driving factors was that I did not want to be away from my wife. I didn't want to be away from kids when I had them. And I just knew that was going to happen, right? If you stay in the military, that's the military life. You're going to be gone. You're going to miss Christmases, all this stuff. And I just didn't want that for myself or my kids or my family. And I was also, following always had in my mind my plan, right? And then there was the idea that, well, transitioning from being in the infantry to being a police officer, those things are more, pretty close. I mean, in their own rights. So, I got out of the Marine Corps, went back to Northeast Ohio, had this plan, which the plan was go to a police academy and get a job as a police officer. Seems very strategic.
Yeah.
You know, not a whole lot going on there in that plan. So I went to a community college to be a police officer, or the academy, and I thought, you know what? I need a job while I'm doing this. So I applied to security companies. That makes sense. I'm in the infantry. I like security. I like policing. I like this kind of stuff.
hmm
I'll be a security guard. That'll be great. You know, dude, I completely had no idea. But, anyways, I went through the whole hiring process with the security company. I'm not even going to name who it is. Had my uniform, what is it, pressed or whatever, and
hmm
all that stuff, and trimmed all the little, and, I basically showed up to the supervisor, whoever, was showing me the area I was going to be working, and it was like a night shift. So he's like, just come ride with me and we'll do it.
hmm
And the guy was, older, overweight, just all bad, riding around with the truck with him. And he was, using like this little, I don't think, like a magnet thing to like basically say he was here at this location and drive around the yard and then do another one. Right. And I was like, wow, this makes me feel terrible, actually, you know? And so I quickly, abandoned, like you probably can't even say I was ever employed, honestly.
Yeah.
Cause I just like straight up was like, not going back there, not doing that again.
hmm
So, I went on unemployment, and I was also getting the GI Bill. I don't remember how long that was for. I had to keep applying to, I don't know, whatever the requirements were for the unemployment at the time, which, again, maybe that's part of your plan, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, could be.
Factor that in on whether or not you qualify for that. Because I think, don't they, like, when you get out of the military, don't you automatically qualify? Yeah, you do.
You do, yes.
So, a little pointer there.
Yeah.
Probably use that time to figure out what it is you should be doing and work the plan that you have in place. But I was getting the GI Bill, so I was going to school going to the academy for free, also getting paid whatever that was, a week or a month or whatever that was. And my wife was working at the time. I think she was a receptionist, maybe. So it kind of turns out in Northeast Ohio, I don't know what it's like now, but probably hasn't a lot changed, is that there's more people for jobs than there are jobs.
hmm
So my wife had a hard time getting a teaching job, even though she had a degree. I went through the academy and had a hard time getting an officer job because, how civil service, if you're not familiar with civil service, states do it differently, but I think it's in Ohio. You have like the cities are required every 2 years or something like that to give a test. And so the civil service test is where you take the test and you apply to be an officer when they have a position open.
hmm
But they're required by law to serve the test. So you don't even know if they're hiring, right? So you get to pay money every time you go. It's like $20, whatever it is.
Right.
So I took a number of tests. I drove hour and a half away to take tests for places that I didn't even know if they were hiring, and it just, I saw it as something that wasn't going to work, and another point or two, if you're in the military and you want to be a police officer, I mean, I think Texas is almost different in that way, at least, in our area. It seems like that is an actual route you could go, right? Couldn't you go you can go to a community college for whatever, and you can pretty much get hired, right?
Yes. They still, the community college does have that law enforcement program available, and I think that's more generally structured for the smaller departments, right? They don't have their own academies. And so
Constables and things.
right. Yep. Yep. Now I already knew that, so that's what they do in Colorado. Except for some of the bigger departments like Denver PD, they have their own academy. Colorado Springs has their own academy. And I think maybe one or two others. Other than that, none of them, they're all smaller departments. They don't have their own academy. So going and getting that civil service deal through college is the only other route to go. I think most officers that are not in larger cities go that route. But to me, it's more complicated.
Even if you don't plan on staying with the larger agency, or you don't, whatever your goal is, you're going to get paid to go through their academy.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably end up staying there anyways. I mean, they're hiring you, but that happens with our own academy is people get the job and they're gone right out of the gate.
Right. I think they have to stay like a year or something, right?
Do they?
I think
know.
so.
Well, I mean, I don't think so, because they're well, how are you going to keep them? I mean, they would have probably like a sign-on bonus that you have to pay back probably, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
But otherwise, there's nothing they could do. But anyways, just like as a pointer again, and I didn't realize this, because in my mind, my plan was, okay, what do you have to do, police officer? Oh, you have to go through an academy. Oh, here's one where you live. Go do that. And I just thought in my mind was like, you're going to get this certification. You're going to get hired. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like that was what's going to happen. But it turned out that's not what's going to happen. And so, going from the Marine Corps and having all these standards and, all this stuff, to driving around at night with a security guard that's, whatever, it just, that was not, I'm glad I recognized that. Like, no, like, turn your stuff in. Here's your stuff. I'm not coming back here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think that would have been well for my emotional state. So I removed myself from that situation and focused on the academy. And I'll say this, because my time in that academy at the time was so close to me being, I mean, I got out of the Marine Corps, I maybe waited a month, and then I was in this police academy. So again, man, I tell you, I struggled with that because again, you just kind of don't realize that you're going to be around people who don't care about certain things and act a certain way. And for me, being like a professional and a humble person, I've always carried myself and approached all situations just in the sense of asking yourself, how serious is this? Comparing it to what seriousness to be in the military, which is like in a combat zone, right? So like people are dying or whatever. And then and I don't know if you would call it necessarily PTSD or whatever, right? But you're experiencing all these things that are maybe traumatic in their own way, or just not, even if you're not exposed to it, you just know about it, right? Going through all these high standards, all this stuff going on, to sitting in a classroom where, like, I'll tell you what was the trigger for me was just like people were being mean to other people. I lost it, dude.
Oh man.
I went home and broke down, we'll just say. And my wife was with me the whole time, so she kind of knew. I was talking to her about these things. Like, I remember specifically saying, like, I don't understand how people could be so, like, rude to not rude, but like cruel, right?
Yeah.
And it seems like and now maybe it even is such a juvenile thing to think about or to compare it to. But I was, in my mind, I was thinking, man, people being blown up, people dying, people not going home to their families, and you're sitting here talking about this other person or whatever, right? I just struggle with that. But all you can do is continue to move forward anyways, right? Again, I think that's speaking to some of the struggles. That's why I asked you about, were you around other employees? Because you kind of weren't. Mm-mm. And so I was like, oh man, I was hoping we like shared some commonalities there.
Oh, no.
But I also experienced that too in the grocery store, and specific incidents I can remember where, again, not far removed. I think it was probably at this point 6 months to a year removed from the Marines, and actually not even just removed from the Marines, but removed from Afghanistan, Helmand, right? And I'm not sitting here trying to say, oh, I experienced all these things and it was crazy. I'm not doing that at all. But I remember being in the grocery store and somebody complaining about something. I remember being in line and just setting all my stuff down and leaving. What is going on?
Well, that's the big picture mindset that you have, right? You experience, I guess, more of life, right? So you have a bigger perspective on life itself and what's, what you would consider small and whatnot. Other folks, right? They have a much smaller perspective. So what they think is a big deal to you, it's ridiculous.
Exactly. And so at that time, I got a job working as a nuclear security officer at a power plant. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. Well-paying job, swing shift. At that time, just married. Probably my son was on the way. Um, Pay was great. Benefits were great. Like they had a pension and a 401k. But the same thing that you were kind of thinking about, same thing I was thinking about, same thing you, if you're in the military now or you get out or you went through this, you were also thinking about was, um, this doesn't feel like it's my purpose,
Right.
Like I couldn't possibly stand here for the next 20 years and look at an x-ray machine. I couldn't possibly sit in this booth for the next 20 years and monitor these cameras while I'm watching Netflix,
No.
you know? And I wouldn't even go back there,
Mhm.
now I wouldn't even go back. So I continue to try and pursue a law enforcement career. And I basically got an opportunity. I kind of was like giving up. I'm like, man, it's too hard to be a cop. Um, this is funny. It's too hard to be a cop. I'm going to go sign up for the Highway State Patrol. Man. But so I ended up doing that, going through the whole process, physical fitness test.
Was this in Ohio?
Yeah,
Okay.
Ohio. And I made it through everything, and I got my packet for orientation to show up on this day. And I don't remember exactly how it works. I think the orientation is like a week before you actually have to go, if I remember correctly. It's an orientation. You show up and like, hey, this is what we expect. This is where you need to be. This is some stuff you need to get done. So again, emotionally at the time, I want to be a cop. Do I really want to just be stopping cars on the freeway? Do I really want to be doing that? Like, no, kind of want to be responding to calls, you know? And so I just didn't show up, no call, no show. And, again, just kind of continued to pursue that law enforcement thing. And we talked about this in the previous podcast about, why are we pursuing these things and what are we sacrificing in the process of doing that? And I admit it couldn't possibly be if you're leaving a job that pays well for a job that pays less, it has nothing to do with, you're doing that because you want to do it for yourself, right? Man. And, I would do it again. But I don't even know. I can't remember having that conversation with my wife or whatever. Just when you're together and you've been married and you've gone through all these things, you went to police academy, she knows you're trying to be a cop, and she never questioned me like, why are you doing that? You're going to leave this good job to go there. So that wasn't really something. And I would say at the point where I got hired, and I would say, I mean, basically at that point, it had been 2 years removed from the Marines when I became an officer. So the transition and the complications with getting out of the military at that point were gone. Um, and I know military people in general, it just doesn't work out that way. I mean, they have a plan that goes to crap, and I'm going to live with my dad, and then, oh, that didn't work out. And I think that could really not be a great thing.
No, and it can happen fast if you don't have the proper motivation when getting out, and uh, a set plan with the motivation and a support system all at the same time. If you don't have the collective, then it's got the potential to go downhill for you very fast. Um, an example, if you have a plan, right, and your plan's taking longer than or there's more steps that are involved with your plan, and you don't have the motivation to keep going, um, it may not work out. In the military, you have to be somewhere to set time. When you leave the military, there's no one telling you when to wake up. There's no one telling you when to go do this, when to go do that. If you let yourself get lazy, it can kill your future plans. Uh, I got a little story though as to when I finally made the decision to go ahead and go law enforcement from being a car hauler. I was living with my current wife. We were staying at her mom's place, and it was a nice little neighborhood. Um, it was probably 11 o'clock at night, maybe somewhere around midnight, maybe. And I hear some people arguing down the street. So we were on the second story of the house, and I opened the window, and I can hear some people arguing. So, and again, this day and age, I probably would just shut the window, go back to sleep, um, or be a good witness. But at that point in time, I was like, let me go see. Maybe someone needs help. Maybe they don't. Right. So I went out there. Um, Initially, I had my firearm, and I was like, and I was walking out. My truck was parked out front, and initially, I walked to the house with my firearm, and I was like, you know what? Let me just put this down. So I actually put it in the bed of my truck, and then I walked down the street, and there's two females and a male, and they're arguing. I see the male choking one of the females. So I run up there and I grab the dude and I tackle him through. There was a glass front door, and we ended up going through the glass front door. Um, and I was able to subdue him, and pretty quickly he gave up. Um, and One of the other neighbors, he woke up, and he called the police, and we held that guy on the ground for the police to come. And I think the girls were thankful, and whatnot, but it was the boyfriend of the younger female choking out the mom. Um, and I think it was at that point in time where I finally decided, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and start pursuing this law enforcement deal. I seem to be pretty good at it. so I that's where I had I had the conversation with Lauren, and I started um applying to a bunch of different agencies, Colorado, like I said in the last podcast, and couldn't get into anywhere. So then I applied for Chicago and then Houston, and the wife said, we can't go to Houston, or can't go to Chicago. What if you go there, we're not coming with you. Her and my daughter. So ended up coming down to South Texas, getting a job there, and um, it's been pretty good career so far. I've really enjoyed it. It's fed that thing that's inside you, um, to kind of like we were talking about earlier, the Marine Corps thing. Okay, the Marine Corps instills in you the best of the best. First to fight and all that other stuff. And it's what's fed that inside me ever since. Um, but yeah, I think I've always wanted to be a police officer ever since I left the Marine Corps. I just never set up that plan. I always took the easy route with the truck driving deal. Um, and It finally took one incident to make me realize that I might be pretty good at this. I should probably take a look at it.
So I know that some people that get out of the military are Marines, or I'm friends with several Marines, still. And I think all of them, it's interesting if you go and like talk to them about what they did, or if you, even better, if you're still talking to them or we're talking to them at the time, it's interesting to just hear how that played out for them. And they found their way to wherever they are now. I mean,
Mhm.
I know of more or less one guy that's basically like a professional rock climber, like, and he was like not that he wasn't a rock climber that I knew,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and it almost seems like, and I don't know for sure, I know several of those guys that got odd jobs together. And now they're all back in their own states and they're all pursuing careers or whatever. But you could definitely, you touched on this, you said motivation, right?
Hmm.
And so the ultimate thing about making the decision to get out, because you're either, going to make the decision because you want to for whatever reason, or you're going to stay in and continue to go down that road. But even if you get out after 20 years, those guys aren't like going to retire.
No.
They're getting out to go do something else, and they're going to have the same issues that, well, perceivably, some have connections and stuff and pathways or whatever, but internal struggles that most people do at whatever, 4 years, 10 years.
They might even have more because now they're older, right? So how old are you going to be if, okay, so you go in at 18, you do 20.
I know of a person who's
38 years old.
I know of a person who said, well, they retired from the military, now they're an officer, and they've been around for a bit, and I don't know what they have to do to retire, but whatever the math was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna retire from here, and then I'm gonna go get another job and get that retirement. In my mind, I'm like, you're already older, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's some other goals or reasons why. Maybe he's setting somebody else up as kids or something. I don't know. But dude, you're gonna work till you're dead.
Right.
There's got to be more purpose other than the job at some point, right? And I know a lot of people do work until they're dead, or they retire because they're like, I'm just gonna do 5 more years,
Right.
and then they retire and then they die,
Mm-hmm.
So back to the military thing and getting out. The big thing is know what you want and have the discipline and drive to get there. You already have the discipline and the drive, probably.
Yeah.
Because you are where you are. The one big thing you have to figure out is knowing what you want, which in and of itself can be a whole episode because that thing can change too.
It sure can.
What you want. We talked about in the last episode, 18 years old, you don't know what the hell you want.
No.
You think
no
you
idea.
know. You're throwing darts at a board, basically.
Even when you're getting out of 22, you still have no idea, what life really is, especially life outside of the military.
It's super interesting for me because, I'm just even over the last, we'll just say 1.5 years, 2 years. Okay. All right. Marines, get out. No, I want to do this. Okay. I'm doing it. Okay. Now I know I want to do this. Okay. Whatever. Oh, now this thing that I'm doing with all this stuff, right? It's what it makes you think. It's like, this is what I want now. I wonder if that'll change later, I don't perceive that to happen because there's just so much within law enforcement and military to get into and be interested in. There's a whole number of different avenues to go down. So beyond having the discipline and the drive to get there, knowing what you want is important, but understand that that can change. And it's okay. Well, they say your left and right lateral limits, those things change, just make the adjustment. The big thing that you said is taking action, right? I mean, if you're served up a situation that isn't great, well, if you sit and wallow in that scenario, it's probably not going to serve you very well. You could find yourself in a place where maybe you already weren't in a good emotional state, which also feeds into your physical abilities and mental health and all that stuff. But now you're also allowing the situation to keep you there, probably, right? Which is all not a good thing. And people have asked me, not how to get out of a certain situation or how to stay motivated. Again, a whole nother episode we could talk about mental health and stuff like that. But and this is the hardest thing, and I have some experience with this that I won't talk about now. But what you need to do is you need to take action. But it's also the hardest thing because I'm talking about physical action to get better, right? And another part of that is so difficult is that you want to just maybe get better or feel better or be in a different state right away. But it's like, no, that's not how that works.
Yep.
So that's why it's also super important, like we talked in the last podcast about prioritizing what's most important, and your health is up there because once you get into a position where your mental health is maybe affecting your physical health, it's hard. Things are a lot harder, right? Rather than if you just tried to maintain a good, mental health and physical health, you've already put yourself in a position now you have to dig yourself out of. And it's even once you even dig yourself out, it's hard to not go back there.
Absolutely.
And that's all either prevented from taking action, maintaining, or if you're there, taking action to get yourself out of there, which I'll go into detail more, at a different time. But another thing that you should do if you're in the military and you're getting out, you have to lower your expectations.
Yep.
Now I'm not talking about personal expectations, okay? But you have to lower your expectations of other people because you're in an environment where like the absolute best is expected. And if it's not, it's going to get addressed. Okay. It's just not the civilian world.
No, it seems like the civilian world, most people are only worried about themselves. Um, especially say, so you're trying to start a career in something, right? And you have loopholes. So say you want to open up a bar, right? That's your aspiration, man. You want to open up a bar and serve people whiskeys, right? There's a lot of loopholes that go in with that. And when you go up to the I don't know what they're called, the alcohol tax folks, to get your alcohol license. No, it's uh I don't remember what it is. Yeah, yeah, to get your sales permits for that. It's a certain office you go to. Every county has one. Anyway, so when you go to that county office, okay, that person that is behind the counter, you think they really care whether or not you get your business up and running? No, they don't care about nothing but getting off on time. Okay, so understanding that no one is going to help you but you is imperative. It's becoming more and more apparent every day.
Pay attention to what he's saying, because what he's saying is not just my philosophy on law enforcement. Okay, because I talk about being the best, most capable individual officer you can, because as you know, nobody's coming to save you.
Mhm.
Right? That has to be your mentality. If you are so lucky to just be a part of a team where everyone is there all the time with you, awesome. But that's not the reality of most law enforcement officers. So, you're talking about, you're talking to this lady about something like, oh, well, don't expect her to care about okay, that same mentality as an officer, you're also going to have, whether you're out on the scene by yourself or you're doing a traffic stop. Um, and that's just something I see all the time. But, what you're talking about, that's also something not even I was dealing with or feeling emotional about, what is it, 2012, it's like 11 years ago, 10 years ago now. People not caring is something I'm dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the biggest things. You follow the Instagram Kinetic Concepts _ group. You see me talking about this thing sometimes in this story. Nobody's going to care more about the thing that you care about than yourself. Like I said, lower your expectations. Because even now, dealing with other people in certain situations, man, you're just gonna get whatever it is you get, and that's something I still have a hard time with. I'm like, bare minimum, like do the bare minimum. I would be happy with that, but sometimes you're not.
It's you'll live a happier life if you come under the realization that nobody cares about anyone but themselves, and nobody's gonna help you get to your goals. Okay, if you keep that mentality and understand that and respect that, then you'll be able to go further.
Well, yes, understanding it is one thing, but again, having what's going to separate you from everybody else is when that stuff happens. I'll tell you right now, dude, I just want to throw in the towel.
Yeah.
Like I just want to give up. And not to get in too much of the entrepreneurial thing, but the only thing that sets winners apart from people who don't make it is the fact that in those situations where people were telling you no and people weren't giving you opportunities and where people were literally trying to take your legs out from under you and dismantle what you've built, the only thing that separates yourself from the people that have already made it is that they were willing to push through that and continue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they had the drive to do that. Man, that's a tough one. Again, that's a whole other thing we could talk about on a different day. But so I talked about taking action, right? Having the discipline and drive, knowing what you want, which can change, lowering your expectations, and also having more than a plan A, right?
The support system is going to help as well.
Yeah, that as well. Having a plan B and a plan C, also okay. And also understand like that there's getting out of the military, there's a bunch of resources for you, right? You're kind of a fool if you just like don't use your GI Bill. Figure out a way to use that.
Right.
I
haven't started using mine until recently. I thought I'd never go to college or do anything, and I finally decided to take the plunge and start doing online classes.
Yeah, that's super easy. I mean, I got a bachelor's around here somewhere,
Yeah.
criminal justice. But with I was signed up for classes to learn how to build things like construction or heavy machinery. Because in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to go to school. Oh, you'll pay me to go learn how to work this heavy equipment? That seems more interesting. I'll do that.
Right.
And so those are things that you could get that aren't going to use up a lot of your GI Bill, first of all, because the course is they're only about 10 to 20 grand, depending. You go, it gets paid for, you get paid while you're doing it, and then you get a certificate at the end that says you can do this job. And then you can be like, well, that kind of interesting too.
Right.
And you can go over there and do that thing. You can go be an electrician. I'm going to school to be an electrician. Now at the end of that, you got all these options, right? So definitely understand that you can't do nothing, right? You have to use what's available to you. But I think more or less, beyond deciding, because this really wasn't a podcast about deciding what you want to do and achieving that goal. This was more of a podcast to focus on how difficult it can be from an emotional, physical perspective of leaving somewhere where there's a standard and all that stuff, and then realizing, oh crap, it's not like that out here.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to give listeners maybe an insight. One, this is the expectations, and two, you're not alone because everybody's felt that way. I mean, imagine being someone on SEAL Team 6, right? You retire and then you go to the grocery store and some lady, I'm just using my personal experiences, some lady is complaining about something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like to me, that was like my trigger. I was like, oh Lord, get me out of here.
Yep.
So, again, you're not alone, but that's basically the general guideline. And avoid things probably that don't help, like alcohol.
Yeah.
Like gas pedal less, brakes more.
You're right.
But you got anything else on this transitioning?
No. It's just gonna be kind of making sure you keep the correct mindset and keep pushing, don't quit.
Yeah, and understand that if you don't know, it's okay.
Ask.
If you don't know, ask. But if you don't know what you want or what you want changed, that's okay. It's going to happen probably for your entire life.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, you can reach me at Kinetic Concepts _group on Instagram. If you're looking for training in Texas, kineticconceptsgroup.com. You can fill out the subscriber on there to be notified of our upcoming training, or if you have the ability to host training in Texas, you can send me an email at instructors@kineticconceptsgroup.com.
118, so this is my family all over. I can't copy. I want family all over. We got crews coming.